pride of place or a waste of taxpayers' money? It remains to be seen. Let's be honest, it's starting to feel a bit like déjà vu on the high street. There's been another big government announcement in the last couple of weeks. It's another shiny new initiative, a promise to revive town centres. This time it's called the Pride in Place programme, with all sorts of talk about community auctions, local powers, and billions in funding being farmed out to hundreds of high streets. That sounds great, right? But the question is, will this be transformation or just yet another waste of taxpayers' money? We've been here before. In 2011 and 2012, we had the Portas Pilots. That was £100,000 won by each of 13 towns who'd promised projects to reinvent the high streets by developing markets or updating the look and feel of the place. Shortly after that came the Future High Street Fund under Grant Shapps, the then High Streets Minister. That launched in, I think, 2013. It was around £1 billion distributed between 72 towns, and it was all about modernisation, diversification and rebuilding. But we're now over a decade on, and we're still talking about the same things. We've still got vacancy rates, disjointed planning and volunteer burnout, because it isn't about the money that fixes these places. It's about the capability of the businesses, the collaboration between them, and relevant and appropriate support from local authorities and destination marketing organisations. So let's have a case study on this. This is quite an interesting one. I've been working with West Lindsey District Council for the last 5 years under various different programmes of business support. But the first time I went up to Market Rasen was to be a judge for their window dressing competition. Now, Market Rasen was quite a surprise. They were one of the Portas pilot towns, and their whole pitch was about, let's put the market back in Market Rasen. And that was a great idea. So they won the Portas funding. Further down the line, they also won the High Street X Fund. Now, if you know Market Rasen, you'll know there's a racecourse, quite salubrious, and there's a very lovely, quaint little market town. But there's not much else around. It's a very rural area off the beaten track in Lincolnshire. A good half an hour's drive or so to Lincoln, about 20 minutes to Gainsborough. So there are bigger towns not too far away that pull the local population out of Market Rasen to go shopping and doing their entertainment elsewhere. People do come into the town, but the racecourse is the draw, and that's on the edge of town. So putting the market back, that sounded like a great plan. They had the funding from the Portas Pilots, and they had a volunteer team, town team as it was called back then, if you remember that, and they had the energy. But the funding went towards things like securing market stalls, the storage, the delivery, the putting up, taking down, and so on. And that exhausted the fund quite quickly. The logistics were quite hard. There was a lot of work involved, and the volunteers were all unpaid. When you think about that, these are real people with real full-time jobs or businesses to run. And what happened was volunteer exhaustion set in. And this happened across town teams up and down the country. And even CICs that were set up, community interest companies were set up to deliver destination marketing. A number of them have gone out of business and entered administration because there just isn't an unlimited fund available and people need to be paid. So regardless of the effort and the heart, the town team disbanded. So that £250,000 and maybe more of taxpayers' money was spent with no sustainable impact. And that isn't a failure from lack of passion. It's a failure through lack of structure and lack of recognition that to do things properly, you have to do things professionally, and that means paying people. So here's what I'm seriously worried about. I hope and pray that Pride of Place doesn't follow the same playbook. History shouldn't repeat itself. There's been another flurry of press releases and people saying, yes, it's great, it's great. Lots of short-term enthusiasm. But then will there become exhaustion and decline? Because where the country is now, we simply can't afford that. Let's remind ourselves what the retail and high street landscape looked as we ended September. The ONS were reporting that in August, retail sales volumes rose by 0.5% month on month and 0.7% year on year. But the 3 months to August, volume fell by 0.1%. So that really means that August's growth wasn't growth. It was all about inflation and something to do with the warm weather making some demand. The BRC told us that retail sales were up 3.1% year on year, but that again is mostly driven through food and drink inflation. Non-food, which is the discretionary spend heartland, was only 1.8% up. So really what we're seeing is shoppers are spending more just to get the same basket. Then there's consumer sentiment. The GfK Consumer Confidence Index fell from -17 in August to -19 in September. Every single measure dropped. The confidence around personal finances, major purchases, outlook to the economy. So households are clearly tightening their belts before peak season. And maybe they're already hoping and praying that Black Friday delivers the goods, quite literally. The most worrying one was the OECD's forecast that UK inflation was at 3.5%. And that's the highest in the G7. The slower growth is expected in 2026, and food prices are rising. Trump tariffs are biting, and global uncertainties everywhere with wars popping up and disruption in the globe. When all those issues arise, and the news is selling us a story of trouble here, trouble there, worry about this, worry about that, what actually happens is, despite if it is truly affecting consumers or not, confidence drops. That means that they're less likely to spend. So the opportunity for retail to recover is much limited. So we need to look forward and be realistic, but not be too depressed by what's going on in the world at the moment. We're heading into the end of October and towards November. And really, this is the month that sets the scene for the golden quarter. October gives us Halloween, half-term, and a run-up to Black Friday as we enter November, because Black Friday, one day, it's now a whole month. They're all going to tell us, the stats from these sort of events and consumer activities going to tell us how confident or cautious the public really is. Because if the families pull back on discretionary spending, it'll hit fashion, home, and gifting categories first. If footfall holds up, it'll be thanks to things like clever place marketing, local events, and experiences worth leaving home for, particularly with the nights drawing in and, the autumn weather biting. So really, for retailers, local authorities, business improvement districts, destination marketing organisations, and anyone involved in place management, now's the time to double down on what really drives performance. And from my point of view, that's people, well-trained people, sharp presentation, great windows, good layouts, great point of sale, clear pricing that consistently gets across the value proposition, and reliable stocking levels, because you can't buy what you've not got. Customers are making fewer trips to the shops, but when they do shop, they want it to be worth it. So thinking a bit more about this whole place focus and what strong place management means, what it means to retailers, what it means to the community, and how that links back to boosting footfall, consumer confidence, and of course, pride in place. I'm going to talk a little bit about another town in West Lindsey that I've had the pleasure of working with, and that's Gainsborough. I started working with them 5 years ago, as I mentioned, and the town was looking run down, a little shabby, and it needed an injection of love and care and attention. But over the last couple of years, the town's been completely transformed. And this has been a real significant concerted effort between the local authority and the businesses and the community to make a difference to the place. So they've got public realm improvements, more greenery, nice signage. They've got some pretty finger posts as well as other signage that make it just feel easier to get around the place if you are a visitor. They've got some free parking available, and they've really updated the visitor experience. A new cinema has been created in collaboration with one of the cinema operators, which has helped to maintain evening footfall, which has had a knock-on benefit to the evening and nighttime economy and hospitality and leisure. And the best bit was their shopfront restoration programme. Now, we've seen with the Pride of Place that there's a strange suggestion that we would have places auctioning off long-term empty shops, but to who? But moreover, that the local community in a sort of a board of decision makers will be able to determine if operators can trade from a place. What we had in Gainsborough was, I think, like a gaming arcade, a couple of betting shops, a couple of vape shops. And we all know they don't look particularly elegant necessarily. And for a lot of people, they don't like that type of shop. But we have to accept that if they can survive and they're paying their rent, their rates and their staff and their taxes and everything else, if that's what people want, if there's demand for that, we shouldn't be so quick to push them out. Whereas under the new powers, the new community powers under Pride of Place, those kind of businesses would be pushed out or potentially vetoed. Now, Gainsborough has a number of those businesses. But with the shopfront restoration programme, they look nice. And there's this amazing post on LinkedIn. If anybody's interested, look at the West Lindsey District Council page, scroll back a while, and they've got photographs of the before and after that have been animated. And it's profoundly different. And shops that you might consider to not be necessarily the most desirable to a high street now look beautiful. It's possible to make the place look incredibly different just by updating the frontages, harking back to the heritage as well. It's a very historic town centre, so they've restored a lot of the heritage buildings and they've made it feel clean, welcome, inviting, as opposed to how it was 5 years ago when it didn't really feel that way at all. They really epitomise what Pride of Place needs to be about making it a place that people want to go to, giving reasons for them to linger longer and making it look appealing and attractive so you are enticed across the threshold of the store to go in and hopefully spend. Now, that sounds great, but actually, when you speak to the retailers in Gainsborough, footfall is up. They are reporting that they are seeing better trade and increased sales, and residents feel much prouder about their place again. So if that isn't what real Pride in Place looks like, I don't know what does. And it's about targeted investment, coordinated, and it's supported by business engagement. And of course, upskilling the businesses as well to make sure that they are relevant and sustainable in the modern retail environment. So my take on this is if the government really wants to spend this £5 billion effectively, they need to back more projects like the ones that have taken place in Gainsborough, building the skills, confidence, the collaboration, and not adding extra bureaucracy. I do really think that this empowering communities to auction the empty shops can only work if people actually want to occupy them. And if a place doesn't look desirable and hasn't got footfall, why would anybody want to occupy them? I mean, they're empty for a reason. Letting the locals block tenants because they don't like the look, the signage or the sector, that's not really local empowerment to me. That's paralysis towards business. It doesn't seem consistent with basic economics, supply and demand. If a shop's going to be viable, people are going to be spending in it. If they're not spending in it, it's not going to be viable, it will close. Unfortunately, if the community want to have the shops that certain members of the community don't like, I guess that's kind of tough because vacancies don't fill themselves. You need businesses to be attracted. You need consistent marketing to bring people back. And if you want to change the dynamic of a town centre, it's all about the events and the experience to keep people coming back, giving people a reason to visit, giving people a reason to stay and giving them reasons to keep coming back. That whole thing of let's go out to wherever it is. There's always something fun happening there. Otherwise, the risk is really straightforward. That £5 billion will be spent and hopefully, well, not hopefully, likely as not, nothing sustainable will be left behind. What I would say, hopefully, they can take a leaf from Gainsborough's book and make sure that something long-term and sustainable happens with that $5 billion and it really boosts employment and local economies. Continuing looking at policy level, we're still waiting for the Levelling Up Bill amendments. That's going to come out in the next autumn statement, which is going to be really late this year. It's set for the 26th of November. And from my point of view, thinking retail, that is very close to peak trading. It's 2 days away from Black Friday. Any personal tax rises or spending cuts at that point could shake consumer confidence really suddenly, right when retailers need them to be most confident. We're also looking at things like business rates reform, skills investment, and practical support for local growth as non-optional. They are seriously essential if we want to talk about reversing decline. There's been a lot of talk about policy, and yet retail is a people business. People buy from people. There's a reason that people don't like self-checkouts. There's a reason why Amazon closed all of its unmanned stores recently. It's because there's no human interaction. For a lot of people, going out to the local shop, particularly people on their own or the elderly, and having a chat with the staff, that might be the only human touch they have that day or even that week. I know a lady that runs a newsagent and she said she wasn't quite sure whether she was running a newsagent or a community service because the elderly population would pop in to buy a paper and spend 20 minutes having a chat. Of course, they didn't mind. It was nice. They had loyal customers and as long as they weren't getting in the way of other customers. But it is important to recognise people. And that's one of the key messages from the Charity Retail Trust as well. I think it's fair to say that retail staff are heading into the toughest stretch of the year. Theft is on the increase because family budgets are under so much pressure. People that would never have thought of shoplifting have done so because they just don't know where else to go. Aggression is rising. People are so less tolerant, and stress. I mean, we saw years back fights breaking out in certain shops over a TV and a Black Friday deal because people were waiting for a deal, and they'd sold out. The last one was on the shelf and people were literally wrestling over it and security staff had to step in. There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of rudeness, just basic rudeness towards retail staff. There's a reason why people don't want those jobs anymore, and the reason is it's not a particularly pleasant environment to be in. So I believe that management and charities like the Retail Trust and policing as well needs to pick up on the theme of retail crime and help our people, because we need people to feel happy and safe and comfortable in their workplace. They don't need to feel threatened, especially when it's hardly the highest paid job out there. So I think if you're a manager or lead a team, remind them that there are free confidential support networks through places like the Retail Trust, and the industry runs on people power. We might think it's all about the spreadsheets and the margins and the calculations, but if people didn't put stock on shelves and didn't serve customers with a smile, there'd be no sales whatsoever. And I want to make sure that in this run up to Christmas, we don't forget the people. We need to protect their morale, their safety and well-being, because I think that's even more important than chasing sales targets, because a happy, engaged workforce deliver the sales without even thinking about it. I guess to wrap up today's episode, where does that leave us? It's almost like we've been there and done that and seen the movie. It's been Portas Pilots, it's been Future High Street Fund X, and now we've got Pride in Place. If the government wants a different ending, it's going to need to write a different script. And I think that script has to be focused on skills and capability, not grants and handouts, on business engagement and everybody getting behind a scheme and collaborating and working together, not just bureaucracy, and ultimately creating real and sustainable success that people can be proud of and not just coming up with slogans. I don't think pride is something you can pay for. It's something that is built together through the right kind of investment, collaboration, and community trust. And it is what keeps places alive long after the photo opportunities are over. And that's the reckoning that Westminster really needs to face this autumn. As a final thought, I'd like to ask Rachel Reeves to face up to her own retail reckoning. She says she wants growth, but she can't do that by tinkering. She's got to tackle the tax system head on. And that includes a full reform of business rates, as has been called for by many people, the BRC most notably, for at least a decade, if not longer. And it's also got to make sure that large retailers are exempted from punitively high tax bans, because they're some of our most significant employers, whilst not relieving small businesses of the opportunity to grow through the rates relief that she has come forward with. I do believe that the commitment of lower business rates for retail and hospitality for 26 onwards is really important. And what really needs to be focused on in the November statement is no more cosmetic schemes. The final one, where I feel there's an opportunity to reverse something that has really damaged our tourist income through retail, is VAT-free shopping. People from the USA, China, and further afield used to come for shopping tourism to places like London, Manchester, Edinburgh, and so on. And about 2 billion of sales has been lost due to that. That money's gone elsewhere into other countries. I would really call on the government to reconsider reversing that policy so that we can get our tourism income back, because it's not just the shopping income. It's the hotels, it's the eating out, and everything that goes with shopping tourism. Rachel Reeves, if you're listening, can we have some sensible policies in the autumn statement for retail this time? I'm Claire Bailey, the Retail Champion, and you've been listening to Retail Reckoning.
Yeah, retail reckoning, no space for dusty